The state of Maine will be using the ranked choice method of voting for the primary election on June 12, 2018. Only 4 races have more than 2 candidates and will be determined by ranked choice voting: the Democratic nomination for the office of governor, the Republican nomination for the office of governor, the Democratic nomination for the representative to Congress in Congressional District 2, and the Republican nomination for representative to the Maine legislature in House District 75. Ranked choice voting allows voters to choose candidates in order of preference. The votes are tabulated in rounds until only 2 candidates remain and one candidate is determined to have received the majority of the votes in the final round. That candidate is then declared the winner. Here's how the tabulation works. Let's assume there are 4 candidates for governor. Let's say that blue is your first choice, the person you would most like to see win that elected office. Yellow is your second choice, and if neither of them can win, you'd rather see purple in that office before orange. So you rank purple third and orange fourth. You are not required to choose more than one candidate if you do not want to participate in ranking. Your first choice candidate for that office will be counted on election night. If no candidate receives a majority, the voting will move into ranked choice voting rounds. All of the ballots and tabulator memory devices will be transported by courier to a secure location in Augusta for counting. Let's take a look at how all those votes will be tabulated. On election night, none of our candidates got a majority of the votes. So we moved into round 1 of the ranked choice process. Orange received the fewest votes, so it will be eliminated from the race. But the people who voted for orange as their first choice will still have a voice. Their second choice candidate will be revealed, and their vote will go to that candidate.
Live mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing podium mic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing audio 1 for town hall streams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
took the highest estimate because the guy was very good. I was happy with what was done, but it was like just under 25.
Okay.
Before we start this meeting, I just want to let everyone know if there's anyone here for the Elm Watch Shade Tree Committee meeting, there was a mistake in the date, and it is tomorrow at 6:30. So in case anyone's here by mistake, we don't want you to have to sit through the planning board meeting.
But we will discuss trees in some way, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay, welcome to the June 6th, 2018 meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. The attendance, this is it. We have everybody here that's still on the board. We had a couple of resignations recently. I would like to first, at Werner's suggestion, take up item 5 on our agenda, which is new planning board chair and vice chair. So,
Can I make a motion, Tom?
you may.
I'd like to open discussion on electing a new chair, first of all, and I'd like to nominate yourself for that position. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Any discussion?
I'm happy to do it, and
All those in favor? Unanimous?
yes, it is. And since we're on a roll, I would like to nominate Nina
For
Vice chair.
for vice chair, who, despite the rolled eyes I just saw.
I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor? Okay. So, we've done item 5. Okay, so that brings us to
minutes?
minutes. And Ed, you wanted to make a modification of some sort?
Well, I wanted to ask, quite honestly, my recollection isn't 100%, but I like the minutes, they were complete and very clear, but I didn't see any mention of Russ's resignation. I thought we discussed it during the meeting. It may have been that we did it
at the end
afterwards.
to, cheer him on. So some mention should probably be in there.
So perhaps at the end, just a
Yeah.
sentence that
That we
that added-
sadly accepted his resignation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, I think that's good.
With that amendment?
Do you want to add marks to that? Did we discuss?
No,
Mark
that wasn't
just
discussed
sorta-
at the meeting.
He just resigned.
He did it by email later. I
Okay.
mean, he actually did tell me after the meeting, but I don't think he talked to others.
Okay.
So, yeah, why don't we, can we get a motion on that as amended for the minutes?
We move to accept the minutes as amended with the addition of Mr. Grady's resignation.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, so that's good. So we are ready for our item 1, which is 180201 Binnacle Hill 2, Phase 2, Teradyne Consultants Authorized Agent, continuation of the public hearing. And I know you guys have a bunch of new stuff to present, so go to it. And of course, give your name when you speak and such.
Is this thing high enough for everyone? Kind of wobbly. Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Mike Tadema-Wieland. I'm a civil engineer from Teradyne Consultants, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, who is represented tonight by Jeff Bowley, as well as his attorney, Sandy Gay. Binnacle Hill Phase 2, we've been before you a couple times for this. The last time was April 18th when we started the public hearing. And as you'll remember, most of the discussion centered around Henchy Way. Just to give you sort of a brief reminder of the project, there are 13 new lots. It's connecting to Phase 1 of Binnacle Hill, which is Binnacle Lane, which is this road here, which is constructed. It's existing today. Timber Way is proposed to be built in this location, and that'll be an entirely new road built to public standards. And Henchy Way is this existing private way here, which currently serves as the driveway for these two residences that we saw on the sidewalk, and we've heard from both of the families that live in those houses or own those houses. The previous proposal was, as you know, for full access. So both traffic would be able to come and go through both means of access. We heard a lot of feedback from the public. We heard from the peer review traffic engineer, and we heard from you folks, members of the board, that there were some issues with that. The lower section of Henchy, near the intersection with Kings Highway, is the right-of-way is only 20 feet wide. That doesn't meet the standards for a private way. So we were asking for waivers at that time to create this private way that would allow two-way vehicle access. And frankly, we heard that it wasn't not very favorable response. So we went back to the drawing board and we studied it, and we've resubmitted a revised plan, very similar. The lot layout is nearly identical. Number of lots is nearly identical. Timber Way, again, nearly identical. But Henchy has been redesigned as an access for pedestrians, bicyclists. Of course, the two residences that currently use it will continue to use it, as well as emergency vehicles will be able to get up to Timber Way should they need to. And we've talked a little bit about the need for emergency access at the last meeting. We heard feedback favorable to providing emergency access from the board. So we've done that. So Henchy Way, the new design for Henchy Way, is at the narrow, at the end near Kings Highway, which again is only a 20-foot right-of-way, 12-foot wide travel way, narrow esplanade, and sidewalk. And then as you get farther into the site and the area becomes greater to construct that, it increases to a 14-foot width. The esplanade grows to 5 feet, in which there'll be some plantings, and again, a sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk. So the sidewalk will extend throughout the project from the end of Timberway, which meets Binnacle Lane, all the way to Henchy, and then all the way down Henchy to Kings Highway. So continuous sidewalk for pedestrians, and like I mentioned, vehicular access for the current residents on Henchy Way, as well as emergency vehicles. There's a gate in order to prohibit just any traffic from using Henchy. There's a proposed gate at the top of the hill. And that would, we've discussed that with the fire department, with the fire chief, as well as with the Public Works Director. We received favorable feedback from them on the design. The fire chief's take on the emergency access was, yeah, if you'll give it to us, we'd love to have it. And the Public Works Director, not concerned with Henchy because, of course, it'll remain private. It's not going to become a public road. But we did review the design of the end of Timberway, which is a proposed hammerhead. We reviewed that with the Public Works Director. The dimensions, in his opinion, were large enough to turn around his vehicles. We did provide sort of an expanded right-of-way area, so past the end of the paved area, we're expanding the right-of-way to allow for snow storage, so his vehicles can come along and push snow into that area. The maintenance of Henchy Way would be the responsibility of the homeowners association, so they would be responsible for plowing that, keeping that open. And the gate would be locked, and really there'll be 2 keys. So one will be with the fire department in their fire trucks, and the other will be with the homeowners association in case for some reason they needed to open it for maintenance or for some other reason like that. But otherwise, the gate would remain closed, and Henchy wouldn't be used through traffic. Also, in our recent resubmittal, we've detailed the waivers that are required for this design to be approved. None of them have to do with Henchy Way, since that is now no longer to be used for access. They all have to do with Timberway. And I'll sort of just touch on them quickly, and happy to answer questions on them after I'm done. So the first one is a request to waive the requirement for 3-to-1 side slopes on the fill section that's at the outer edges of the road cross section in wetland crossing areas. So typically the slope would be 3-to-1. When you get into a wetland area, it'll be steepened to 2-to-1, and that's to minimize the impact to wetlands. It's a standard practice in the state, and something that the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers, frankly, nearly requires for you to do in order to minimize those impacts. Again, we talked to the Public Works Director about it, and he didn't see any problem with that. The second waiver request has to do with the dead-end road length. So last time we were here, there was not a dead-end road. With the changes to Henchy, Timberway has become a dead-end road. The ordinance limits dead-end road length to 1,000 feet. Timber Way is proposed to be almost 1,500, so 1492 is the proposed length. And really, for this waiver, when you think of dead-end streets and you're trying to limit the length of dead-end streets, really the number one concern is emergency access to them. So, if you get something happening out at the end of a dead-end street, and for some reason access is blocked by the single access, you've got a problem. So, by providing the emergency access across Henchy, we feel there's no reason to limit the length of Timber Way to the standard dead-end road length. And that same section of the ordinance, which is of the subdivision ordinance, which is 12.2.B.2.H, which talks about dead-end streets, talks about dead ends terminating in a cul-de-sac. A cul-de-sac doesn't really work on this site, primarily because it creates so much impact. It's larger. It would result in larger wetland impacts, and it would result in more clearing and impacts within the area that we're now protecting as habitat for spotted turtles, as well as other species that have been identified in the open space. And so again, we're proposing a hammerhead. The hammerhead design has been reviewed by the Director of Public Works and found acceptable for his purposes. So we're asking for you folks to allow hammerhead design instead of the typical cul-de-sac. And another sort of, in my mind, kind of a silly waiver, but one that Werner pointed out we needed. There are two groups of lots that have proposed shared driveways. So these lots here, 27 and 28, will have one shared driveway, and 25 and 26 will have a shared driveway. And we've done that because there are wetlands across the front of those lots, and the single driveway allows us to cross that wetland only once, thus again reducing the wetland impacts. And there was a very similar design for phase one. There were lots of shared driveways in phase one of this subdivision, but the ordinance actually defines a private way as I believe, and Werner, correct me if I'm wrong, as any way that accesses one or two residences. So these two shared driveways technically need to meet the private road standards. And as we've talked about before, a private way needs a 50-foot wide right-of-way and an 18-foot wide paved area, pavement section. That's impractical for driveways serving two lots. We'd like to do a 30-foot wide easement, which would allow the access would be for, or the easement would be for access as well as utilities, underground utilities, and we intend to build a 12-foot wide paved driveway. And again, it all comes down to minimizing the impacts to wetlands. So with that, your package also includes responses to staff comments and peer review comments. Many of them were very technical in nature. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm not going to go through them one by one in the interest of saving everyone a little time. But tonight we feel like we have a complete application. We feel like we're meeting the standards with the exception of the waivers. We feel like we've come to a good compromise on Henchy Way. And so tonight we're asking for preliminary approval of the subdivision application. Thanks very much.
Okay, I have a couple of waiver-related questions. I don't know if Sandra wants to do it or you, but, well, the most obvious one is you have a typo on page 2 of your proposal.
Yes, and I referenced the wrong section. Is
Yeah.
that- Yes.
Yeah, so that obviously needs to get fixed.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Werner, I looked through the Binnacle Hill 1 stuff. I did not find any of the third waiver that they asked for being done in Binnacle Hill 1, the shared driveway thing.
Correct.
So,
I think it got missed.
it got missed, okay. Well, shame on us then, okay.
But it is in there. They do have shared driveway.
That's correct, yes, they do. Yeah, they do have a number of lots. I mean, you know, it does.
I remember the
you know,
shared driveway.
It meets the, you know, I mean, it certainly meets the, you know, the standards. It's also in the LUO, you know, so it's consistent with, you know, in terms of the dimensions are consistent there. But yes, I mean, technically, we have this second standard in here that, when you look at the definition of private right-of-way, it gives you, you know, you have the definition that Mike referenced, and then in table 12.2-3, it gives you the dimensional requirements, so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, there were 3 other waivers on Binnacle Hill 1. Okay, which may have no relevance to this, but I did want to make sure. There was a reference to a cross culvert problem, and I assume that was unique to Binnacle Way? Not,
Yeah, I think what that was is I think they proposed 2 12-inch
Yes.
culverts crossing the road instead of a larger culvert.
yes,
Usually that's done when you don't have enough cover to put in a bigger pipe. That's not proposed anywhere.
that's not here.
on
Okay, so
this.
you're not going to do that
Yes.
one, okay. There was also a waiver of a partial tree survey.
Yes,
But you did a complete
We
tree
completed the
survey?
survey,
So
yes.
that's not a problem. Cool. And then there was, the third one required things on street trees in the field area. I'm assuming the field area is not part of your stuff, so. Okay, I just wanted to be sure,
Yes.
seeing all of those. Now, the one thing I did know and like a lot for your future doing it is the plans for Binnacle Hill 1 detailed exactly the waivers and what meeting they got passed at. So it was really very handy to always have it sitting there on a signed document. So I'd like you to do that for this one.
We will, sure.
Okay. The only other thing I noticed, you said there was only going to be one key in the fire department. In a real emergency, you could conceivably crash through the gate if you couldn't get at that key?
Sure, yeah, when I said one key, that, so there's a, as I understand it, a Kennebunk key that opens every emergency lock in
okay.
town.
Got it.
So there may very well be one of those keys in multiple trucks.
Got it. Okay.
But yes, conceivably, one could crash through the gate, I presume. It's
Okay.
not
So,
preferred.
before we reopen, are there other comments from the board?
I have one. You show Henchy Way now, still with the pedestrian bicycle path on the ocean side of Henchy Way. And again, that sort of lets somebody out right in the middle of the intersection. I'm wondering why you couldn't put the pedestrian path and the bicycle way on the other side, so it emptied out onto the side of the street where the rest of the people walk.
Yeah, so when looking at this intersection, we thought that was the safest area to put people. We think it gives them the greatest sort of view. They're visible by cars, and we thought that was the safest place. The other thing is we kind of wanted to keep them away from the houses that are over there as well.
The two houses? Yeah, but when it comes down to the street, they're not on the side of a street when they enter that intersection. They have to cross.
Yeah, I mean, they would be crossing Henchy Way, which is a driveway for two houses, but yeah, I mean, technically they would.
Well, they could cross Henchy Way before
Yeah.
they entered the
Before the
intersection. Yeah.
Ed?
Yeah, I had a question on the hammerhead layout. No expertise, but I read about cul-de-sacs in the, the existing regulations. Clearly presumes a circular, and it talks about a distance of, an 80-foot distance from the center of the circle to the property line minimum. What's the equivalent to that for this hammerhead? Is it near the property line?
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, I'm not sure I can explain it better. If the picture that I saw, picture the cul-de-sac laid out, and the three diameters drawn, one to the inside of the pavement, one to the outside of the pavement, and then one to the property line.
Sure.
30, 50, and 80 feet respectively.
Yes.
What's the equivalent outer one?
Dimensions, sure.
Yeah, for the hammerhead.
So if you have your plans in front of you, maybe you've seen this, but on sheet P 1.1, it's detailed. There's an inset on the plan, and
I was just hoping you could tell me, does someone turning around, are they doing it at the edge of the property, or are they doing it far from the edge of the property, like greater than 80 feet?
yeah, so I'm not following. I think if you look at the detail, you can imagine what turning movement they're doing.
Which sheet again?
What's the third one in?
So it's P 1.1.
Fourth one.
So in the upper right corner of P 1.1.
Yep.
So the sort of the dashed darker line around the outside is the property boundary,
Right.
and the sort of the gray hatch area is the pavement. So a vehicle would not be crossing the property line. Is that answer your question?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the rationale is for the existing 80-foot dimension.
Right. So the 80-foot
Outer radius, yeah.
or radius.
Yeah.
It's really designed for a fire truck to be able to turn around.
Circular.
To go outside of the road in order to turn around?
To not have to.
Yeah, and stay on the pavement. So a fire truck can come in, do the loop, and leave.
All right, I'm gonna have to go back and look at this. I thought it described a road that was 20 feet wide, had an inner radius of 30 feet and an outer radius of 50. In addition to
Correct.
that, it has an 80-foot distance from the center of the cul-de-sac to the property line.
Yes.
I didn't understand the rationale for that. I could only presume it was to keep turning around from
Headlights.
being close to the headlights.
Yeah. Well, no. It's.
I was trying to figure out what the equivalent was in a hammerhead design.
Sure. So, I mean, a right-of-way width is 50 feet for, you know, for a linear road. And really that extra area that's within the right-of-way but that's not paved is so the town can get in there. It's for drainage, it's so the town can get in and maintain it. Sometimes there's utilities under there. So again, you don't want your pavement right up to the property line. So it's just to give that area for road maintenance, really.
So just, thanks for your answer. What's the distance on this inset that I'm looking at here? Are we 10 feet away from the property line? Is that what this is saying?
From the edge of pavement
From
to
the edge of the
property line?
pavement to the property line?
So, I mean, it varies a little bit, but so from the curb on the top of the page to the property line is approximately 10 feet.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And you have lighting in there, I believe.
Yeah, so we're showing 6 streetlights on, so I guess the western side of Timber Way along here, at a spacing the same as it was installed for Binnacle Lane.
But at the Hammerhead.
There's one light proposed at the Hammerhead.
And what about Henchy Way?
There is no lighting proposed on Henchy.
So people would have to utilize any kind of light from Kings Highway or the one light you have on the Hammerhead if they were coming home in the dark on bike or foot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback we got from the neighbors was that it was the less light the better. So we were trying to be sensitive to that.
I
don't think the
understand, but
applicant's opposed
you
to
have
adding-
residents you have to be sensitive to also if you're going to have a pedestrian way there. You can have low lighting.
Sure.
You don't have to have a street lamp there. What bothers me about the setback there from the Hammerhead to the public right-of-way boundary is one of the reasons for that setback, I believe, is headlights at night, so that you're not having headlights shine onto a public way and hitting someone in the face that's driving along on another road. And I wonder if you might take a look at the property there and consider putting up some screening in terms of hedges or something like that, evergreens, so that headlights don't go into people's houses that are, you know, on the boundary there.
For those 2 lots that are on the Hammerhead, right?
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So around. So just to be clear, now, are we talking about at the end of Timber or over here on this side?
over there.
Over there, but also at the end
Also
of
the end,
Timber, I
sure.
think, some screening, some evergreen screening would, you know, prevent possible problems from headlights at night.
Okay.
I mean, I see headlights from my bed, coming into my bedroom from across the river in river locks.
Yeah.
Okay, they travel. They're meant to travel a distance.
Okay, Neil, you have anything? Scott? Question?
No, all set.
Okay. Well, I guess.
May I ask one more question?
course.
Just, on shared driveways, how is the plowing of those driveways handled?
Yeah, there'll be an agreement between the lot owners
Thank you.
to maintain those.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we can reopen the public hearing at this point. We have any abutters that would like to speak, or neighbors would like to speak on this topic? Go ahead. Identify yourself and such.
Hi, Hi, Teresa Henchy De Benedictis from 10 Ocean View. I had a couple questions the last time, and that you didn't touch on it in your presentation, so I just wanted to see where this iteration was versus the last on some issues that we had. The last layout of Henchy Way that you had before you changed to this hammerhead design was, it was hooking to the right quite a bit as opposed to its current layout. Is that still the case, where it hooks to the right closer to the property line where the wetlands are? Or is it following its traditional path?
Would you like me to get
Please,
an answer now?
please.
Do you have others? Then maybe I can.
That's the one, so what's the layout of Henchy? You know, does it hook to the right, or does it, the current one hooks around and goes into your back where you're gonna be building? Then I was concerned, what was the contemplated planting, if anything, along Henchy Way, being concerned with our view down the hill and to the ocean? There's the giant oak tree is about dead center of our windows, and like there not to be anything else there besides that. And also concerned about our sewer line that does go out the front lawn and hook up into the manhole that's in Henchy Way. And what kind of assurances would we have that that thing's not gonna get crushed by heavy equipment coming and going during construction? And wondering if it could be TV'd, and if we could get a copy of the pre and post TVing of the line, that would be great. Street lights, glad to hear that you're not contemplating putting street lights there. You know, people coming and going. I walked up and down that hill to my grandparents' home for decades. Know nothing, you know, never felt unsafe. People, you know, there's gonna be more activity now, but I think that's the nature of it. It's a friendly, homey place, and it doesn't seem to, I feel like a street light is not appropriate. If it's gonna be on the hammerhead, I guess we'll have to live with that, but on Henchy Way would really be problematic, to say the least. And I didn't know what Henchy Way is gonna stay a private way. I didn't know what surface material, was that gonna be different than the pavement in the back? Were you gonna do like a gravel or reclaimed asphalt, which is what's on there now, and that really holds up really well. So I was just curious about the finished product on Henchy Way.
Shall I
Please.
address those now?
Please.
Yeah, so the alignment, or the location of Henchy Way has changed a little bit. It does follow its current path much more so now than the previous iteration of the plan. We had a lot of constraints in the last version trying to meet the town's road standards, and now that it's a bicycle path and a walking path, we no longer have to do that. So it's narrower, obviously, and it'll sort of follow its current alignment up through there. The plantings in Henchy, or in that area, so I brought a couple renderings, and these were included in the packet. So this is sort of a representation of what it might look like from Kings Highway, sort of looking up. So narrow road and sidewalk, and really probably some grasses or something like that in that in the area between the driveway / emergency access and the pedestrian sidewalk. So nothing tall proposed. The tree that is up top here will stay. There's no reason to, as far as we know, there's no reason to get into that during construction. So there's no plans to take that down. The sewer service certainly will do during construction. I'm sure Jeff's happy to do whatever he can to make sure that's not impacted. We're not exactly sure where it is. We're not aware of an easement for it, so, but But yeah, I think certainly,
It was family property.
yeah.
So I'm not sure what mechanism they did other than show across the front. Lawn, the surface and the
Right.
cleanouts there. You can tell right where the cleanouts are.
Yeah.
And then it goes straight to the manhole.
Yep. And the surface it's proposed to be paved.
Seems like overkill.
Okay, any more questions?
One second. Oh, I've got a bunch, okay. Members of the board, town, staff, and the public, my name is Lisa Miller, and my husband Roger and I own property at 4 Henchy Way that abuts the land that is proposed to be developed as Phase 2 of Pinnacle Hill. As requested at the initial public hearing on April 18th, my comments tonight focus on the most recent plan revisions for Phase 2 of Pinnacle Hill, namely the plan set dated 5/30/2018 that was submitted late last week. Notice of the meeting agenda went out this past Monday, so 2 days ago, giving us very little time to review the plans. We had planned to have our engineer here tonight, but he could not review the plans and had a conflict. He's in upstate New York at a planning board hearing. Due to significant changes and the lack of review time, we would like to request the continuation of the public hearing to allow for reasonable time to review the changes in detail. These changes are significant. Developer has had the benefit of over 5 weeks to revise his plans, whereas the public has had less than a week to digest the changes. We do believe that this is a reasonable request. However, in the interim, we'd like to discuss a couple of key issues. First is the requested waiver to the dead-end road length requirement. Second is the safety and trespass concerns with a revised design that I will get into. And third is the failure of the project design to meet all the requirements of the cluster zoning requirements. So first, Article 1, purpose of the Kennebunkport subdivision regulations as revised February 1st, 2017, includes a statement that the purpose of the ordinance, among others, is, quote, to ensure comfort, convenience, safety, health, and welfare of the people of the town of Kennebunkport. And also, quote, to minimize the potential impacts from new subdivisions on neighboring properties and on the municipality. As presently designed, the project fails to meet these requirements. First, I'd like to discuss the dead-end road length. Section 2H, dead-end streets, states that dead-end streets or cul-de-sacs will be no longer than 1,000 feet. The revised plans envision a dead-end road of 1,492 feet, nearly 50% longer than what is permitted. Many of the issues I'm about to address arise solely due to the excessive length of the proposed dead-end road and would go away if the project were limited to what the 1,000 feet required to the 1,000 feet required under the ordinance. There's a reason dead-end roads are designed with a 1,000-foot limitation. Section 2.2 of the subdivision regulations administration grants both the authority and the responsibility to the planning board of the town of Kennebunkport to administer these regulations. Specifically, it states that the board shall administer these regulations. As a lawyer would say, shall is never optional. We, the public, as residents and taxpayers of the town, rely upon you as a volunteer board members to uphold the requirements of the ordinance. We also count on the board not to grant spurious waivers. There are no valid reasons to grant a waiver of nearly 50% to the dead-end road length for Timber Way. Doing so not only would set a bad precedent, the proposed design would result in both a dangerous situation and encourage unauthorized trespass. Instead, Timber Way's road length should be limited to no more than 1,000 feet from the New Bedford Road, including the section of Binnacle Lane. Among many other benefits, limiting the dead-end road to 1,000 feet will eliminate the need for emergency access gate on Henchy Way. Furthermore, such a gate is not allowed under the town's ordinance. Section 11.5B1 traffic conditions of the subdivision ordinance states that gates or other form of permanent access restriction across roads, streets, or pedestrian ways are not permitted. if I move your boards? So this is a little bit of a close-up of the gate. You can see the gate here. I'm going to flip this the other way. This is our driveway. There's the gate. Okay. The gate's location creates a dead-end road with no turnaround. Okay. The only option for vehicles, whether they be municipal vehicles, plow trucks, curious visitors, parking space seekers, or lost persons to turn around will be our driveway. So if a car comes up here and gets the gate and isn't supposed to be here, or is looking for a parking spot or something else, they have no option other than turn around on our private property. This has happened when it was just a dirt road. It was minor. My in-laws, when they lived there, would put out horses at the end of the driveway to prevent turning around on their property. The grade in the area of the gate also approaches 10%, which is very steep. In the winter, this grade will be problematic for plow trucks who will have to back down Henchy Way, or more likely slip, or turn around in our driveway. In a snow or freezing event, this would be extremely dangerous. So you've got this gate almost at the crest of the hill and nearly 10% grade right on the other side of the gate. Paving the road will encourage summer parkers seeking parking spaces who will have to turn around in our driveway, again trespassing and unduly burdening us and our renters to police the trespass. So the fact that you're proposing to add pavement is going to make it much more attractive for someone to head up this road, or someone who's renting down in the area that doesn't know their way and should be on Kings Highway to accidentally take a left and head up Henchy Way. The proposed Henchy Way road improvements also require significant blasting. Despite the limited time to review the plans, we were able to have our engineer do a cursory review of the submitted plans. However, he needs more than a few days to do a full review. I will share one comment he made with you tonight. Quote, when you look at the profile of the road with the utilities versus the existing conditions from station 11-15 and then walk the property, you recognize that this is a major blasting job. In some areas, the depth from existing surface to bedding of piping is through 10 to 12 feet of solid rock. The ridge behind your lot that runs along the crest is solid ledge that is flush to the surface. I will later show you a plan with the wetlands mapping. There's a reason the wetland areas are wet, and there's a reason the dry areas are dry at the top of the hill. The top of the hill is solid rock. Developers' plans show dropping the grade 5 to 6 feet to get to the proposed roadway elevation. You need to figure in another 7 to 8 feet to the bottom of subgrade, plus 2 to 3 feet to get to the bottom of the utility trenches, as overblasting will be needed to get the rock out. If you look at the existing contours versus the proposed contours, you need to add 2 more feet to get to the bottom of subgrade. At station 4+22, it's a strong 10-foot cut for utilities in solid ledge. This means that we're going to be living through a war zone of blasting, not only for the road improvements, but also for the homes on the proposed lots 21 through 24. And as Teresa said earlier, it's also likely to do significant damage to utilities that are in the roads serving our houses as well as our foundations. None of this blasting would be required if Timber Way were limited to the required length under the ordinance. Furthermore, all utilities could be accessed from Binnacle Hill. Give you a close-up before I switch. This was the original design. This is our house. This is our driveway. The gate is right about here. So at a 14-foot road, someone's not going to be able to turn around without backing down into our driveway. Next, the project design fails to meet all the requirements of the cluster zoning requirement. Under the cluster provision of the zoning ordinance, the developer is required to preserve significant trees in exchange for reduction in the minimum 40,000 square foot lot size in the Goose Rock zone. 2 significant trees are missing from the plan prepared by Longview Partners. We have previously submitted evidence showing that these 2 trees meet the definition of significant as their diameters at breast heat breast height are in excess of 21 inches and should be retained. The Norway spruce in particular is adjacent to one of the wetland areas and provides for valuable stormwater management. Given the significant grade differential, the tree's preservation also would reduce flooding on our lot. Additionally, the proposed blasting would likely cause the demise of the large oak tree adjacent to the ledge knoll. So the two trees that are missing, one is approximately here, the other one borders our property line there. They do not show in the survey. With Mr. Valley's permission, we hired a licensed arborist to go out and measure them, and they measured in excess of 21 inches. So if you want to have the benefits of the cluster zoning provision, I feel that you should be required to comply with all the requirements of the cluster zoning provision and preserve all the trees. These are the trees. As you can see from the photos, there's ample reason for the developer to want to remove these trees. Removing these trees would dramatically open up views for the proposed lots, and in fact, requiring their preservation would make the proposed lot 21 likely undevelopable. So this is the top of the crest. And here you can see the large oak tree reference. This is the maple tree on our property, and this is the Norway spruce. You can see the creek and the ocean in the distance, and this is a close-up of both those trees.
So are you looking down Henchy Way there?
You're looking down Henchy Way towards the water. Also, the submitted plans provide for a wooded buffer between the lots on the southwest side of Timber Way and the homes along New Biddeford Road. Yet the developer made no provision for buffering our lot. Any home in the proposed Lot 21 with its higher elevation and the likely removal of the Norway spruce would sit right on top of our property. In our letter dated March 8th, we provided evidence that the trees met the standard of significant. We are asking tonight that the board either require the preservation of the trees as any condition of development. If you are still in doubt regarding their size, we will request an independent third-party review. I would like to end my comments on a positive proposal, one I hope that the board and the developer will embrace, as there is an reasonable alternative. This alternative would allow for the development of Phase 2 of Binnacle Hill and eliminate many of the safety issues I have presented, as well as the need for any waivers. When I previously mentioned the wet areas, all these areas in green are the wetlands. And as you can see, there's a significant contiguous wetland that runs all the way through the property to here. Under this proposal, much more of this wetland remains undisturbed. So this reduces the length of Timberway to 700 feet plus or minus, allowing it to meet the dead-end road length with no waiver. It impacts far fewer wetlands than the current layout and preserves a large contiguous wetland. It involves less impervious surface area, so there's less surface runoff to treat and less roadway for the town to maintain, because it's envisioned that Timber Way will become a public road. It preserves all the significant trees, including the 2 missing from the developer's tree survey. It creates a slightly larger open space that is not as broken up. It also allows for an access way off the cul-de-sac for stormwater treatment, as well as potential treatment within the cul-de-sac. So that's this area here. It allows for all the utilities to be accessed from Phase 1 of Binnacle Hill, including sewer. It should also significantly lower the construction costs for the developer. There's far less impervious surface, less blasting, etc. It maintains 12 lots, the same number as the original sketch plan submission, or 1 fewer lot than is proposed here. It eliminates the need for a crash gate or emergency access. The only reason you need that crash gate is because of the requested waiver from the dead-end road length. It provides for a pedestrian way if desired, and such an access could be created without the need for pavement. It also eliminates the need for significant blasting or reconstruction of an addition of more impervious pavement on Henchy Way. This also presumes that the existing 3 lots homes would be grandfathered and no improvements to Henchy Way would be required. So before this proposal came along, there were 3 homes served by Henchy Way: the Henchy property, the Miller property, and the Fetzner property. As we have shown, another viable option that does not require any waivers from the standards outlined in the town's land use ordinance or subdivision regulations, we believe that granting the developer's requested waivers would both be unreasonable and potentially challengeable. Paving Henchy Way and creating a fancy esplanade and gate is out of character with the existing neighborhood. Doing so will only encourage vehicular traffic up a dead-end road, resulting in both potential safety issues and certain trespass. Developer's revised proposal is designed to market Pinnacle Hill from Kings Highway and extract maximum value versus a reasonable return. This is at the expense of and detriment to the residents of the neighborhood. I'd like to go back to my earlier statement that the purpose of the subdivision ordinance and the role of the planning board in reviewing projects is, in part, to ensure the comfort, convenience, safety, health, and welfare of the people in the town of Kennebunkport, and also to minimize the potential impacts from new subdivisions on neighboring properties and on the municipality. I've shown an alternative proposal that would do that. The proposed plans as submitted do not meet the requirements of the ordinance. As such, we request that the board not grant preliminary subdivision approval tonight, especially given the limited time for the public to review the significant changes to the plans. We also believe it's unreasonable to grant the requested waivers. Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Could you give the reference again of the ordinance that you said did not allow gates?
Yes. That is section 11.5B1.
Of which document?
That is the subdivision ordinance.
Subreg.
It's towards the end of that section. It says gates or other form of permanent access restriction across roads, streets, or pedestrian ways are not permitted. And so the whole reason for the crash gate is because the road is longer than it needs to be.
Can I ask a question about, you make an interesting point on the difficulty on doing a turnabout on a gated, closed-end Henchy Way. What's done today when that road is plowed?
Well, it's plowed, because the Georgs who own the property no longer have a home up there. It's just plowed by a private contractor that serves just the Fetzner and the Miller property. So it's our.
How do they turn around?
They turn around our driveway, but they're our plow person. They're not a municipal plower or another contractor. So they're just serving the two homes on the property.
So they're plowing your driveway too?
Correct. They're our plow contractor. So they have permission to use our driveway.
And you would not want that practice to continue if someone else were to plow your driveway?
Well, it's not just that, it's that.
You were making the point that it was unsafe to turn
Right.
around
So
now.
if you have
and
a
it
large.
isn't now, but
Right.
it would be.
But that's because they're going up. If someone were to plow all the way up to the crash gate, because you would need that emergency access, they're gonna have to plow further up the hill, up that steep grade. And it's backing down that would cause the issue, and it would no longer be our contractor because it's proposed to be maintained by the Pinnacle Hill Association.
No, I understand that two separate issues
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
The safety one is what I'm getting at. You're saying you don't believe there would be a safe way for a plow to plow that road?
Correct.
Okay.
Because it extends.
Because it's too steep.
It extends and it's too steep, and there's no turnaround area up there.
Okay.
So, again, the crash gate is a solution to a problem that shouldn't be allowed to exist.
No, I understand, Lisa. Yeah, I get that. And then I'll show my ignorance of the ordinances. You say that the cluster zoning requirements requires the preservation of all significant trees?
Of significant trees, yes. I don't know if it says all or not.
I didn't think it said all. That's why I'm pushing on it.
Right. I'm not sure that all is in there. However, I don't know why you would, what's the reason for carving out those two trees?
I'm not arguing that
Right,
point.
right.
I'm just trying to clarify your point.
Yes. So, and they're
So-
not
so
on
you-
the
you-
survey, so we
You
feel
would
the
say
survey's
that it
inaccurate.
violates the spirit, at least,
And
if
in the-
not the literal
Right.
words.
And also the fact that they're not even in the submission, that means the submission's not complete.
Those are all the specific questions I had, although I would be interested in the applicant's response to any of the points that you'd made.
I have a couple of questions too, but I'll mention that the regulation that preserves the significant trees, okay, stops basically after the homeowners are in, they could cut them down. That's one of the issues we have with the subdivision regulations that we're trying to work out.
I don't think that diminishes the need to abide by the spirit of the
That's
regulation,
right.
though.
That's
Right.
That's not your point.
No, that's not my
Okay,
point.
all
I'm
right.
just
We had
commenting.
previously suggested at the old plan, that the lot lines be adjusted so that those trees not be within a homeowner's lot, so that they couldn't cut them down. Under this proposal, it would be part of the open space, so therefore, in theory, they should remain unless the association cut them down.
Right, and I think you've tied a ribbon around this by presenting an alternative plan that at the cost of one lot would take care of all of these. Is it that simple?
Well, I'm not the engineer, but as I said, we would have had our engineer here tonight. It's going to require some more engineering on their part, and what they would end up with is a larger lot at the top of the hill, which hopefully would be a high value lot, but not 4 lots at the top of the hill. So from a price perspective, I'm sure that the price drops down.
It would be 12 lots at the average size of the current 13 lots, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Understood.
Yes. So it is. We believe it's a reasonable alternative that has a lot of positives for everybody.
Okay.
Are you saying that large lot or that extra isolated lot there is going to be accessed through Henchy Way?
Yeah, so what we would suggest that the developer would want to do is, because there were 3 homes that accessed this, so this was the entire Henchy parcel, and there was 1 home up here that accessed it. And so we would argue that I think the case could be made to grandfather to keep Henchy Way exactly as it is and allow one more home accessing off of Henchy Way.
But don't you think in many ways that would decrease the value of the lot because it wouldn't be paved? You'd have an unpaved steep road going up to a lot?
And it wouldn't be a part of the subdivision.
And it wouldn't be a part
Be
of the
isolated
subdivision?
from the neighbors.
I think it would be preferable because you would have much more privacy. You wouldn't have the extra traffic. You've got the views. There's no reason to, why add more impervious surface area? As Teresa said, the substance that's on the road right now works great. It's worked great. We have it graded every couple of years. It works lovely. It's not, why add more runoff, more water to be treated? There's already flooding at the base, at the intersection of Henchy Way and Kings Highway that the Festers can attest to.
But that person would have to plow that lot for themselves, and you still have a snowplow going up a steep grade.
So a residential snowplow doing a residential driveway is different than the size of truck you would need for a 14-foot paved road, et cetera. And it worked when the Henchy house was there. So we had an informal agreement among the 3 homeowners to split the cost of plowing.
And
it
where
worked
did the
just
plow
fine.
turn around?
Pardon?
Where did the plow turn around?
I wasn't there when they plowed, but maybe. Usually up top, yeah, up top.
It's flat up there.
Right,
Okay.
so it was safe, not in our driveway.
You're of the opinion that keeping the Timber Way within 1,000 feet basically keeps it within the regulations, and but the problem with that is, even though you keep it within the regulations, it's only one road that services all those houses, whereas the plan that the developer has does have an emergency access, so that if Timber Way got blocked and people needed a way to get out, there's really no way for all of those houses except for one to get out through another road, Henchy Road.
And that's no different than Binnacle Hill Phase 1. So Binnacle Hill Phase 1 is a 1,100-foot dead-end road. Kings Highway, if you come down the store and take a right at Kings Highway, that is 9/10 of a mile. It's one way in and one way out. So I think what we're doing is we're trying to fix a very minute situation of a problem that doesn't exist. The ordinance anticipates that up to 1,000 feet is safe. If not, the ordinance would be drafted differently. And so here, I would argue that you should use what I would call the Hippocratic Oath for planning boards, which is first do no harm.
Well, the ordinance indicates that up to 1,000 feet is safe for a road that only has one way in and one way out. But here, they're asking for a waiver because the road would have another access for emergencies. That's a slightly different story.
But a 50% waiver? With all the other issues that we pointed out in terms of the situation of a dead-end road, a gate that's prohibited by the ordinance, people trespassing on our property, because you're creating a dead-end road on Henchy Way and you're paving it and putting a sidewalk in and encouraging more use of a dead-end road with no way to turn around.
You're encouraging pedestrian use.
It's 14 feet wide, cars too.
But you can see at the end of that road the crash gate so people can see it's a dead end. They're not likely to go up there and say, oh, a gate, you know?
If
if I
that
have
were
a
the
key.
case, Nina, if that were the
It
case,
works.
we wouldn't have had these issues for years of living there. So my husband's family has owned that house since 1979. And when in its current paved situation, people are looking for parking spaces. They're constantly going around. So I beg to differ. You can have your opinion and I can have mine. They don't need to be the same.
Well, I'm not trying to, I'm playing devil's advocate
Yep, that's
here
fine.
because there are two ways to look at this. It's not that I'm saying one's right and the other's wrong. We're just trying to get a picture here of what's the best way to put in these house lots and have access. And one advantage of having the Timber Way stop is that several people of the public have mentioned they didn't want another road where people could come up Binnacle Hill, go Timber Way, and then come down Henchy Way to access the beach, when basically New Bedford Road is clogged. And here you have a way that people can access the lots, but you're not going to have through traffic there because you have the crash gate there and you only have an emergency access. So that's one advantage of having that emergency access there.
I think if you look at this, the developer's plan and the rendering, you're talking about two very, very different neighborhoods. So you've got Binnacle Hill 1 and Binnacle Hill Phase 2. Together they work quite well. They're high-end homes. The lot prices are $450,000 to $550,000 in Binnacle Hill 1. They're likely going to be more up here. These are simple, modest cottages on a dirt road. And the preserving the neighborhood character is one of the requirements of the ordinance. And allowing this fancy paved road with the esplanade and the crash gate is, to me, it's the wrong solution for a problem that shouldn't be allowed to exist because there is a reasonable alternative. There's an alternative that allows for a 12-lot subdivision to be completely contained within Binnacle Hill itself. A reasonable length dead-end road. The Timber Way would only be 700 feet dead end. It wouldn't even be 1,000 feet because you could at least partly get out. So I just think if you're thinking about the Hippocratic Oath concept for a planning board, which is first do no harm, and I think what's proposed here is definitely going to do harm. You're talking about that dead end road, that crash gate is going to create a situation of trespass on private property, our property.
Yet you have, I don't see how it would encourage it, even though it's paved, because you're going to see that crash gate. 1, 2, you're going to have signs up there that say dead end and no parking. Am I
And
correct?
have you been at the beach when people were looking for parking spaces? And where they
I've
park?
been down that beach many times
That
looking for
pavement,
parking
will turn
spaces.
us into a parking lot.
Why does it have to be paved?
When you come up.
Well,
Henchy Way-
if you're going to say something, please come to the mic. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I want to see all sides of this, so.
Roger Miller, also 4 Henchy Way. When you come up Henchy Way and you enter at the Fetzner's house, the way the row of curves, you will not, I don't believe you're going to be able to see the crash gate when you enter that road until you come around the corner by our driveway. Just the way it angles and goes up. You can kind of see from this alone that, sorry, which one it is. When you get, this is looking up, the gate's up over here. You're not going to see it. You just won't. So I don't believe the sight line thing is going to come into effect. You're just not going to see it. Thank you.
Your point is the paving is what's attracting.
I think it's attractive. It creates an
Trespass?
attractive nuisance. Yes. So I think if you want pedestrian access across Henchy Way as it is now, there's a way to create it from off the dead end cul-de-sac. It's drawn in on this option. You don't even need to pave the access. I mean, we've all wandered around the beach for years with flashlights on dirt roads. So it doesn't need to be fancy to provide people with access. We ride our bikes down the gravel road. To get to the beach if we feel like taking the bike. So things don't need to be fancy to provide that pedestrian access. And Henchy Way and where we are, we're not a fancy neighborhood. Binnacle Hill, maybe it's a fancy neighborhood, but we're not a fancy neighborhood. We don't want a fancy solution. We don't need pavement. We don't need a fancy landscaped esplanade.
Well, if that emergency access were left unpaved, would you be happy?
No, because you still have that issue of the crash gate and the turnaround in our driveway. You're creating a dead end. So to solve a problem for a dead-end road that's too long because you're being asked to grant a 50% waiver in a dead-end road length according to the ordinance, you're creating another dead-end road with no turnaround and no safety situation. So you're trading one problem for another. And I just think it's a situation where you can have, there is a reasonable way to develop this property and not have to have a dead-end road with a crash gate.
But Lisa, it is a dead-end road today,
Correct.
and it doesn't have a turnaround except in your
At
driveway.
at the top of the hill, it does. Or
I
you
thought-
can go up the traveled way and turn around and come.
No, you said that this proposal was creating a dead-end road that cause people to turn around in your driveway, but today it's a dead-end road where people turn around in your driveway.
Right, but there also aren't a lot of houses that, there aren't the 4 new houses at the top of the hill that depending on the grade differential, you'll be able to see the houses from the road. You won't be able to see the crash
But there'll be
gate.
signage that says it's a dead-end road.
Right, and it doesn't stop people looking for parking spaces. I don't know if you spend any time at the beach down at that end, but we live it. We live it day in and day out.
I'm thinking the equivalent is up on Ocean Ave where I do walk. And the people that are on the private ways off of that have signage up because people are always turning around because they want to look at Walker Point and all. And they seem to have been able to deal with that. And those roads are paved.
Right, people
And
aren't
they are
trying
dead
to,
end
yeah.
as well.
But people aren't trying to go to the beach on Ocean Avenue.
But one of the issues we had was that because you've got Binnacle Way coming up and it's a dead-end road, it's really not desirable to have another dead-end road. You really need to have another emergency access in case Binnacle Hill Road is cut off in some way.
Well, in that situation, if you're really concerned about that, the developer also has under contract property right on New Bedford Road. It's a pre-approved lot, so therefore it's not part of the proposed development, but they have other land. So if you wanted emergency access for that could be, the lot might be big enough to provide for that.
But that is not part of this application.
That is
And
correct.
that's not something we can consider right now.
But I still say your ordinance allows for the 1,000-foot dead-end road. The alternative proposal before you is only 700 feet. And we're trading a certain safety issue for the possibility that a tree falls down and someone's on the wrong side of it.
Can I make a minor comment?
Sure.
For about.
It's your meeting.
About, I don't know, 10 or 15 times you have used the wrong word for our subdivision regulations. They are not.
Singular.
An ordinance. They
Sir,
are
a
a regulation.
regulation. Thank you.
It's similar but different.
Yes, it is a subdivision regulation.
But
And
anyway.
there are requirements under it.
There
And this
are.
proposal does not meet all the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, if we were trying to do the land use ordinance, we would be the
Right.
zoning board of appeals doing stuff instead. But it's,
Yeah.
the subreg is our document,
Yes.
as you
And,
pointed out.
and all my points have been based off the
I
subdivision, so I
agree.
apologize for that error.
Okay.
And I would make one last point in terms of blasting. We blast roads around here all the time. There are very conservative regulations on the blasting, the hours it can be done. The contractors come into neighbors' houses, they check them out before and after they check the properties. They're required to. They're under very strict regulations there.
And I do appreciate that. It's just that there's a significant amount of blasting and disturbing of undeveloped area here for utilities that is would not have to happen with the other proposal because they can be accessed off Binnacle Hill 1 without the blasting.
Perhaps, but I know of no place in Kennebunkport where putting in a road, they haven't had to blast something.
But this spot up here, it's all ledge. That's why. It's a big ledge. So anyhow,
Yeah.
so it's clear what our concerns are. I think you understand our position, whether you agree with them or not. The one thing we would ask is we do feel this is significant change, and there's not a lot of time. The plans came in late last week. We were notified of the meeting on Monday, and so for the developer to had many weeks to review comments, letters I've submitted in the past, we would ask for more time than just now. So I don't.
Okay. Well, we would also like to hear the applicant's response to all of this as well.
Are you again going to send a written copy?
If you would like, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to respond. I want to take several steps back in the process and talk a little bit about the existing site and how we arrived at this design. I appreciate the effort that Ms. Miller's gone through to show alternatives, but I think you'll see we've also looked at those alternatives, and there's very good reason that the plan looks like it does. The site has sort of two significant environmental areas. One is a significant vernal pool in the sort of the northeast corner or the north corner of the parcel. The other is this man-made pond, which I believe was an old ice pond, which has become habitat over the years for a variety of species, most notably spotted turtle. So the spotted turtle is a protected species or threatened species in the state of Maine, and because of that, there are regulations that designers and developers need to meet in order to protect that habitat. That was also the case with phase one. There's spotted turtle habitat over here as well. And because of that, the state, through the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, was very much involved in looking at road design and lot layout and areas of proposed impact. So when we first undertook phase two, the first call we made was to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And we said, this is what we have, would like your input. And they said, don't go anywhere near the vernal pool and don't go anywhere near this man-made pond as well. In fact, our very early designs had lots throughout here, very close to the man-made pond. You know, typically a man-made pond would not be regulated for what we call adjacency. So you could develop right up next to a man-made pond typically. But in this case, IF&W said it's very likely, because spotted turtles have been identified in the area and it's perfect habitat, we want to see it protected. So the lots that were in this area had to be removed from the plan, which is why you see this gap here. So when we look at the net residential density calculations on this parcel, at 40,000 square foot minimum lot size, after you take out all the wetlands and unbuildable areas, the ordinance or the subdivision regulations say that this lot can support up to 18 lots. So because of all the environmental challenges that I talked about, a cluster was obvious. We're going cluster. We're gonna do smaller lot sizes, and we're gonna protect the habitat. So what you see here is an effort to do that. Everything hugs sort of the western edge of the parcel to stay away from the habitat. We've maintained the areas near the vernal pool and the man-made pond, and we've also preserved some of these corridors. There's a wetland corridor through here that could be used for turtles and other species moving about from wetlands to uplands for various reasons, whatever turtles feel like doing. But so again, the design really comes from that. So We have a lot that the ordinance or the regulations say can support up to 18 lots. What you have before you is a proposal for 13 lots with over 14 acres of open space, the vast majority of which is forested and is going to be put into conservation, into deed-restricted conservation. So the suggestion that this plan doesn't preserve trees, at least from my perspective, is somewhat laughable, because the developer is proposing to remove a tree to develop one of these 13 lots. Regarding Henchy Way, certainly we see the proposed plan for Henchy Way pretty similar to what Henchy Way is today, right? It's gonna serve the two houses that are already there. It will serve pedestrians and bicyclists from the proposed development down to the beach or down to Kings Highway. We think that's a great thing. It keeps cars out of there. It may even, who knows, it may even help the situation down here. Certainly we think it goes a long way to solve the concerns that were raised at the last meeting, which was all these people are going to come down here and park. So giving them a way to get down to the beach by walking or by using their bicycle, we think is a great thing. It will be plowed. It's plowed today. We think it could continue to be plowed in a safe way. And the argument that by paving a gravel road is going to invite people to pull in there and park and who knows, trespass. I don't think that's entirely realistic either. There will be signs. There'll be a sign that says, no through away or dead end, no parking, private way. I think it's going to be as clear as it is today that people aren't to be in there parking. So, and Jeff wanted to talk a little bit about we've also heard comments on whether or not pavement is the appropriate material for that.
Hi, Jeff Bowley, Pinnacle Hill Phase 2. As far as Henchy and pavement, I feel pavement's from just a practical and maintenance standpoint is the proper surface. It's my it will probably be me that plows it, at least at the beginning. Having a gravel or a compacted crushed pavement surface just doesn't hold up over time, and I don't want to have a situation where it's not plowed properly. There isn't proper drainage or runoff. If the road is improperly crowned by a plower over time. So for the long term, I feel like pavement is the correct application here. Thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Since you made the point that you may be doing the plowing, at least initially.
Correct.
I don't mean to speak for the board, but I think there's a likelihood we're going to continue this discussion after people have some time to review more. Would you be able to consider coming back with a description of how you would plow Henchy Way and Timber Way in the first years? Would you, for example, be opening the gate so that the plows would be able to use that? Or would you not want to do that? Would you consider whether there could be a turnabout at the gate on the Henchy Way side that would allow the plow to safely turn around? I'm sure there's other things that you would think about. I haven't plowed myself, but that was an emphasis that Ms. Miller came up with, and if you could come back and address that specifically, I think it would be helpful. Just think about it. Right?
Sure, will do.
If
I might. I'm Sandra Gay, attorney at Woodman Edmonds, here tonight for the applicant and for Ralph Austin, who is traveling this week. Just want to bring up a couple of things having to do with the regulations versus the ordinance. That was a very astute comment that was made. And also the application. There really hasn't been a lot of significant changes to the application from the last time you saw it. The most significant change is that Henchy Way will no longer be used as a through road. Other than that, it's the turnaround. As far as needing more time to review it, actually it sounded like Ms. Miller did have time to speak with the consultant about this and came back with some very specific information about the ledge up there. But we would really like to try to get through the preliminary approval tonight with the understanding that there may still be some additional information that's required before final approval would be granted. And certainly one of the things is looking at the plowing on Henchy Way, which you brought up.
Was there a version of this that had change bars, for example? I got a new book. It wasn't clear to me where the changes were. The whole thing has to be studied again.
So what was sent to you on May 30th, the packet that was sent to you had the changes that were in it, summary of the changes.
I think it came to the town office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't come to me, but, and then
it wasn't
I
circulated?
went and got it, yeah.
I would have thought that would have been circulated. I apologize.
It
if
was
wasn't.
circulated.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just saying, it didn't come in the mail,
Oh.
and, you know.
In order to satisfy the week, we were sent PDFs of your drawings. Believe me, reading them on a phone, it was a lot of fun.
This year, yeah.
I can appreciate that.
Oh, and
Would like to address the difference between the subdivision regulations and the ordinance, and also just make a comment on the issue with the trees. So the ordinance is the legislative document. In order to do something that's not in the ordinance, you would need to go to the zoning board and try to get a variance for that. The subdivision regulations are something that the board arrives at. There's actually a whole section in there that talks about waivers and that waivers are applicable. Those things are waivable by this board if there's a good reason to do so. So just wanted to bring up that distinction. Even in the ordinance, with respect to the trees, and I just had that, I apologize. In the cluster provision, and I just lost that, but it says just something to the effect of that vegetation will be preserved. I better make sure I get that exact language. I apologize. It says a pattern of development which preserves trees, outstanding natural topography, and geologic features and prevents soil erosion. It does not say that every tree of a certain size or it doesn't identify significant trees. It just says there'll be a pattern of development which preserve trees. And as was just mentioned, there's 14 acres of preserved area here, which is largely treed. In the subdivision regulations, it says the board may require the application to include a landscape plan that will show the preservation of any existing large specimen trees. Again, that's not a requirement. And to the extent that the board even required the landscape plan to show that, it doesn't require the preservation of every single tree that may be or may not be considered significant. The applicant had a survey done. They didn't identify that significant. I understand that Mrs. Miller's did, but we're talking about one or two trees. One of the trees on the property line is going to be remaining at any rate. So we're talking about one tree.
was there a reason for excluding the two trees that Ms. Miller brought to all of our attention early days?
My understanding is that the person who did the survey didn't identify those as significant trees. There was measuring around a knot or measuring not around a knot, so that it didn't come up in his survey as
You're saying they're marginal.
tree. Correct. So I guess you can measure it around a knot that's up here, or you can measure it not on the knot, and depending whether you measured on the knot or not on the knot, it could be wider or not. But the applicant's tree surveyor did not measure the knot and didn't measure it as significant. Again, we're talking about one tree.
No, I think I raised the point that I didn't think it said all trees had to be preserved, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to not see that big old Norway pine isn't significant.
I guess it's a measurement, and I didn't measure it, I'm just, relying on the information that we got from our
It's a striking
surveyor.
tree, that's all my point is, yeah.
I appreciate that. Again, preliminary approval, if we can get there tonight, I would appreciate it, is not final approval. Certainly, we can come back with additional information if the board requires it. But the changes, and maybe, Mike, if you want to just go over specifically what the changes were if they weren't able to get that information.
Yeah, just brief. I mean, like I tried to mention at the outset here, Timber Way is nearly entirely in the same place as it has been for several months. The lots are very similar. These two lots, 27 and 28, the lot lines were adjusted marginally at the request of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to move them farther from the vernal pool. The changes are nearly entirely with Henchy Way here, and I think we've gone through them pretty thoroughly, in my opinion, tonight.
I think you've done an exemplary job in the cover letter and in the presentation tonight, giving us the gist of what's changed. I just know personally I felt very rushed in the amount of time that we've had this, and it is a very detailed plan, and there's some controversy with the abutters, and so we're trying to take care to consider it.
I just want to mention, Warner, it's my understanding that a preliminary approval doesn't necessarily grant the waivers.
That's correct. I mean, the final waivers have to be shown on the final application.
Right.
Correct.
So there's still a chance for the public to come in and make a case against the waiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the subregs, it pretty well states that, a preliminary approval is not a guarantee for a final approval.
Right.
Yeah, I have the letter that Peter, as chairman, sent at the preliminary, and it specifically says that the board has voted preliminary approval of each of the following waiver requests. But that's preliminary. Then when the final approval came with final approval of the plan.
I'm sorry, Tom, you're saying the preliminary approval does give an indication that the
gives
board
it-
is currently thinking favorably about
Correct.
these waivers?
We give it, the way that the Binnacle Hill 1 was done, we did a preliminary approval of the waivers.
Got it.
Yeah, is public comment closed?
Yeah, no, it is not.
All right, My name is Scott Edmonds. I am an attorney for the Fetzners, who are the family who lives at the bottom of Henchy Way there. And I believe you've received some of our correspondence about our original. I want to keep them brief. Lisa said a lot of the things that we had discussed, namely that we just got this packet. We have had very little time to review that. We like directionally the changes, but we don't believe that it's at a point where that preliminary approval can be given as of yet. There seem to be a number of issues. Still a number of issues that still remain with Henchy Way, namely what the actual status of the surface would be, what the separation between the sidewalk and the driveway area would be, and all of the issues that Lisa Miller brought up in hers. I'm not going to reiterate those, but I did want to let you know the Fetzners are strongly in favor of continuing this for further review and some more time to just figure out what this all means. Just if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So anyone else on public comments? So I guess the question at this point is whether we proceed.
Tom, I had a couple of more questions with the application, just if there's time to do that. Can I, one of the things that was provided in this latest submission that was interesting and answered a number of my questions was the restated covenant for Binnacle Hill 1 and 2. And do I understand correctly that that the current owners and the proposed owners of Phase 1 have already agreed or are obliged to accept the costs of maintenance of Phase 2 and Henchy Way?
I can answer that reasonably well, I believe. So the association agreement for Binnacle Hill Phase 1, in that the developer retained the right to add more to it, she kept full control over it. So anybody who bought into it with that, bought into it with the understanding that this was going to be added on to, that there would be additional, property that would be going with this. And the developer always retained that right to be able to add this onto it. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay. And one specific question about this is there's talk in here about what individuals can do and can't do with their lots. And one is it talks about how you could put in a tennis court or you could put in a swimming pool or certain other things you can't do. How is lot coverage of individual lots handled in that regard? Can they basically pave that whole lot?
If Ralph would hear, he'd probably get upset with me that I was standing up here to talk to you. No offense to you, Sandy.
Just watch your back.
Yeah, I know. I should be careful. Within the covenants, and I don't have them in front of me, but at the onset of those covenants, it states that anything to be done within the lots need to meet all in any town ordinances. In other words, there can't be there has to be a certain amount of consideration. You asked the question, could you just pave over the whole lot? Well, no, that's certainly
Well, for
not
example,
the
if
case.
you had a conforming lot today, you'd only be able to cover 20% of it with impervious surfaces. Is that true of the individual lots, of these 13 lots? And if so, how could you ever put a swimming pool or a tennis court in these? But that's what it's talking about doing.
You want to tackle that one? You want me to?
Well, I think you still have to meet the town ordinances, which means you could put in a swimming pool if you were within 20% lot coverage.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, the
So
town.
there's no way, because it's cluster, that individual
That doesn't change.
coverage
Yeah,
isn't changed.
That's
Doesn't
correct.
change it.
You
That's
know,
what I
in-
was looking for.
In
Yes.
fact, really what we've,
Thanks.
I think practically speaking, what we wind up running into is that, in a lot of cases, folks that buy a lot that is in a cluster subdivision don't necessarily get that, they're held to that 20%, no different than a lot that's a 40,000 square foot lot. And so,
Right.
so it's pretty heavily restricted in terms of how much you can do because it goes based off of the area of the lot size. So,
Thanks, Werner.
yeah, so I mean, that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't have a pool, but I mean, they're going to have to fall within the confines of that 20%.
But this
coverage
covers
count.
Binnacle Hill 1 and 2, and there are 1 acre lots, and there's half-acre lots, so,
Sure, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it doesn't say
Boils
all
down
lots
to-
will have a swimming pool.
Boils down to a property owner choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other thing I will point out is some of these lots contain wetlands, notably
Right.
25, 26, 27, 28. Those wetlands, wetland areas, the proposed wetland areas that are shown on this plan are the only ones that are going to be approved or are proposed to be approved by the DEP. So no further wetland impacts would be allowed without then amending that permit, presumably.
Understood.
And then in addition to that, there's the area across the back of lots 17, 18, 19, 20, which is a 50-foot wide strip that is restricted from being cleared. So those are just two sort of further restrictions to,
Thank you.
to get to that point.
That's all I had. Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Sorry, if I could just, to readdress Mr. Edmonds' concerns, in getting back to preliminary approval or not, he mentioned that there was a number of issues. There really aren't a number of issues. There's a few issues, and it seems like it's coming down to really the issue of plowing, or paving or not of Henchy Way. I think part of, I know that Ralph addressed this last time when he was here, I watched the tape, having to do with the ownership of Henchy Way. And although there are people who have rights to access it, the ownership will be going with the developer as far as having control over whether to pave it or not to pave it. So ultimately, it's the developer's plan. It's his proposal, and he's proposing that he paves Henchy Way. It's certainly willing to put signs down at the end, and certainly willing to come up with a plow plan or something like that. Either a turnaround at the top of Henchy Way so that the driveway isn't being used, or a plan to open up the gate and plow beyond that. And coming up with that is fairly minor and something that could easily be done between now and the next meeting. But it seems to me that it's really narrow. There aren't really a lot of issues, and I understand, and I didn't realize that, maybe everybody didn't get plans to look at. But the plans aren't changing a lot from the plans that were before this board before that, and before the public, that everybody had an opportunity to look at, other than what everybody sort of asked the applicant to do last time, to come back and make Henchy Way not a throughway. Also, I guess I didn't touch on I think it was mentioned by the board, the 1,000-foot length. And of course, the purpose of that in subdivision ordinances is because if it's over 1,000 feet or whatever the municipality requires, and it's a dead end, emergency vehicles, there's concern they can't get in and out, and some people think the tree falling in the road is silly, or somebody can go out there with a chainsaw. Not everybody has a chainsaw, and sometimes there are elderly people living there, and it's important to be able to get emergency access in there quickly. So the fact that there's emergency access, that alleviates the issue with a 1,000-foot road. And stopping it shorter, you're still dealing with, Binnacle Lane is still there, you're still dealing with that. So even stopping the new road shorter doesn't really alleviate that problem. What alleviates that problem is having an emergency access so somebody can get into it from either direction.
Well, that's some of the issue, but there are other issues there, that hammerhead turnaround. I, for example, would like to know more about the setback and the sight lines to houses down there. I think the issue of headlights into people's homes is an issue, and screening is an issue. Those things were not addressed in even the second plan here. And I get quite concerned about that when it's close to the lot line, especially with those halogen headlamps that cars have now. I've seen it happen not only with myself, but with neighbors of mine when I lived in Massachusetts, going into their bedroom windows. And it can be quite disturbing. So I think that is an issue that wasn't addressed in the plans.
And certainly could be shown on the final plan. I think the applicants agreed with you that some kind of evergreen buffer there would be appropriate for that.
I think what you're hearing, and just let me be clear up front, that I think this is a marked improvement over the original plan, and it shows attention to what we've heard from members of the board and from members of the public. And I know it's not that everybody is happy with every detail of it, but I guess thank you for the diligent work. And I think the only hesitancy that I have to saying, yeah, go ahead, really is the short time that I've had to, I haven't had time to read it in the detail that's needed, given the level of, the amount of information that's in here. And there's not change bars in here. It's not like, hey, I only changed 2 things, here they are, that I circled them. It's, we've listened to you. We've made consistent changes throughout. I think you're going to find that they're only with Henchy Way, but I think we need to read that. And I think you're hearing from the abutters and their lawyers that they need some time to read it. And that's my personal reaction.
So I think what we're saying is that we would, and I'm sure that our friendly attorney won't like me saying this, but that we probably want to continue the public hearing until the next meeting with the goal of a brief public meeting,
Yes.
followed by deliberation and ultimately, if we decide to approve it, the approval of the preliminary plan. That doesn't mean we don't come back here once again after a few weeks with another copy of the plan called final. But at least we'll get somewhere. So I would like to move that we continue the public hearing for 2 weeks from today. And
Second.
okay,
Agreed.
all in favor? So
Could
I
I
think
just,
we are going to continue till next time.
got that. And I don't know procedurally, I'm not sure if this board ever does this or not, maybe Werner. Do you ever consider doing preliminary and final on the same night?
No. No, I mean, I haven't seen that as a practice.
Okay. Some towns do, that's why I was just.
One of the things we didn't talk about tonight, but that was very helpful last time, is we had an independent review to go through the booklet, and I know the police and yourself were into the code enforcement office, and we had an independent engineer, and they came up with the 40-some-odd questions that y'all have responded to in detail. I, for one, before final approval, would like to see concurrence with your answers from the authors of those comments.
The way we usually handle that, I believe, would be to, when we approve a preliminary, when the final is submitted, the first place it can go, or I would say, is back to those original reviewers.
That would be great, but I think it would preclude giving approval of the preliminary and the final at the same time.
Yes,
Oh, well,
I totally.
unless you delayed the
believe that.
preliminary approval.
No.
I think, that's certainly up to the board. I looked over the application, looked at the questions that were brought forward, I was present, at the meeting with the fire chief and Public Works. And so, what you see here on the plan is what was discussed, at that meeting. So, but certainly, it's up to the board if you decide you want to have it go back through peer review, and whether or not you want that as part of, a final submission. I believe that's what we did with.
We did that with Mills Road.
We did that with Mills Road.
I don't think we did I don't know about Binnacle.
We didn't do it
sure.
phase 1. I will say, I requested it for Mills Road because there were a significant number of errors, that were with that, and it just changed a lot of the stormwater calculations, and so that was really the crux for asking for a second peer review on Mills Road, was primarily because of the stormwater calcs. But certainly it's up to the board. You all could ask for, another look at, the revised prelim or the final.
So you make a good point about the fire chief, for example, being in on the review of this
Right.
set of changes. For me, that would take care of their comments. You can speak to the code enforcement, whatever the most expedient way is, but in particular, the civil engineering comments that came in were very detailed, and they found some very specific errors in the original drawings. I don't have the wherewithal to say, yeah, those are all corrected. I'd like someone with that expertise to nod.
you know, as it relates to some of the, you know, the technical details, you know, I mean, I don't expect any of those items, you know, certainly to change, you know, between preliminary and final application. And so if you're looking for, you know, what's the most efficient in terms of time,
Yes.
you know, would be to have receipt of the final application and request that be peer reviewed. You know, you could make that request, you know, you could make that request now, and so that.
No, that makes perfect sense.
When final comes in, I ship it off to, you know,
So why don't we so request that he take the final, once he gets the final, that he immediately send it off to peer review while we're also looking at it.
I have a concern with that, because one of the questions raised was the grade of the road, what it was going to be, and the, you know, blasting and so forth and its effects. And before a final plan comes in, because it's possibility, it might be recommended some changes, between the preliminary and the final, I would like to have an engineer, civil engineer, look at that issue.
Okay. So what would be helpful for that would be to have, you know, specific questions, you know, related to what it is that you want them to peer review, you know, and if it's specific to, you know, the depth and amount of blasting, you know, and those effects, you know, I think that's the general sense is, you know, is what you want a third party kind of review of.
Yeah.
Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, after a final plan, I could, you know, have a peer review by the fire chief and other issues, but if a civil engineer looked at the plan and said there might be some changes here that might be an improvement over, you know, what's planned, you know, to change that on the final plan requires a lot, but to change it from the preliminary to the final doesn't.
Do you believe those are comments we've already gotten in from our peer review, or these are additional issues?
I don't remember whether we got those in or not. Maybe
Well,
the applicant.
I think the issues that you're raising up are additional. I mean, those are additional.
Additional raised by public,
Right.
basically.
Yep.
And
So my concern would be covered either by a review now or a review on the final. So if you want to piggyback it and do it along with this additional focused questions, that might be the most cost-effective way to do it.
If we can come up with the focused questions before the next meeting, so that we can give them to Werner and say, you know, these are things we need to know, whether, we could then approve the preliminary pending answers to these, you know, that we would get those answers in while they were preparing their final, and if they saw them and wanted to change it, they would have a chance to do it.
Yeah, I'd prefer something more than, hey, what do you think of the amount of blasting? You know?
Well, no, the question was raised about the final grade of the road. The plans as they stand now, they are described in what we have for the final grade of the road and the amount of blasting. And you know, I would like to know whether this is, an engineer looks at this and says, this is feasible, this is the best possible way to do it, or suggests something else. And, you know, do you see any extraordinary effects on the housing or significant trees or anything like that?
We're basically talking about having a third-party engineer check the engineer's
Yes.
work, though, that they've done already.
Yes.
Okay.
So-
Presumably
They're saying it's
same people we've already tasked with the,
No, I'm
with the
just-
peer review.
Well,
I'm saying, Nina, I don't want to imply that this hasn't been engineered.
No, that's.
No, I know it's been engineered, but it's one scenario. And sometimes with the DEP, they come in and they look at other scenarios and say, yes, the one proposed is the best one. Or they suggest an alternate, which might help the developer or make it better for the public.
If I can just get a point of clarification from Mike, though, is I don't believe that really your road elevations have changed from the original application. What was initially reviewed by Acorn versus what we have now.
So that's largely true. I mean, there were some small tweaks because we changed the alignment of Henchy
Right.
to make
That's
it
the one thing we need
Yeah.
Acorn to look at.
more
is the Henchy
follow
connector.
follow the existing. Now back to blasting. I hear blasting is a concern, and of course it's always a concern.
It's Kennebunkport.
Well, yeah, exactly. And to that point, the permit that we're seeking through DEP is, so it's a site location of development permit, so it's sort of an all-encompassing permit, whereas a lot of DEP permits only look at stormwater. This one, it looks at a whole host of items, one of which is blasting. So the applicant has a blasting contractor who has put together an extremely detailed blasting plan that has gone to the experts at the state for review, and I think it was Nina who pointed out, maybe someone else. It includes the pre-blast survey where someone from the blasting company is investigating or determining the existing conditions of properties within a certain radius, and then going back and looking at the post-blast conditions. So I don't want there to be an impression that no one's looking at blasting. The state is having a very thorough look at that as they always do. So,
could that be part of the final submission? Will that be? I'm assuming that would be completed by the time you're ready to submit the final.
that's completed as of now. I mean, it's not a requirement of this application.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's tricky that the board doesn't necessarily have the benefit of, but that the town receives a copy of, is that we receive a copy of of the full permit that's that's submitted to the state, and so a lot of a lot of the questions that we've asked that we asked in staff review didn't show up in the town application, but were details and items that were in the state application, and so a lot of that information was just pulled forward. But yes, so you all don't receive the full the full state permit, the full state permit application. It's not a requirement of the subregs. I mean, you'd basically be receiving an application that's similar in size and scope to what probably larger than than what you receive as part of the town process.
So back to the peer review. I think we're completely happy to have was it Acorn. Have a look at the responses that we've put together. Certainly doing that as quickly as possible would be appreciated. Just so the process can continue. But whether it's done, we think we have a set of plans that is very, very close to ready for final approval, frankly. So whether it's reviewed now or whether it's reviewed when we submit a final package, I think that final package is going to look nearly identical to the package that we've just submitted.
So if they look at the responses to a number of the questions were that, hey, we've changed the plan for Henchy Way in a fundamental manner, would it suffice to ask Acorn to review the responses and the changes to the drawings specifically to the Henchy Way, Timber Way connection that have been made with regard to grade and road alignment, and offer their professional opinion?
Sure.
Is that specific enough? Would that help your
That would help me a
cause?
lot,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Can you ask Acorn to do that?
Sure.
Thank you. All right,
Thank
so
you.
I think we're going to hold off. No, we're not.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question, just so we can be clear moving in. If, I don't want to be presumptuous, or frankly, for further applications down the road, should a change come up during the public hearing portion of the review of the application, and an engineer or attorney submit information, what is the time frame from which we should be submitting that information in order for proper review prior to a meeting?
Yeah,
Who
so,
asked for?
I mean, they met the ordinance,
They met
ordinance
the
requirements for submission.
They met the 7 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, although nobody actually got a hard copy within the 7 days. It was a few days after
Yeah,
that, or at
that's
least a
correct.
day
Yeah.
after
It,
that.
we
it
don't
would be ASAP, okay?
It would be, the only thing I'd offer as a practical matter is that, given the size of the package and all, I think if there'd been changes and you'd sit, and again, been able to circle them, and there was ample time to deal with that. But it's really that it's a replacement package, and it's just hard
To
to
read
do
through
it.
the whole thing again.
If we'd had 7 days,
Yeah,
yeah,
'cause-
probably could have done it.
After all, we had delayed the public hearing 3 or 4 times before, it'd come up for a meeting, then skipped a meeting, and then.
Right, understood.
We had 3 weeks
We know
between
this-
meetings because
concerns.
of an extra month, extra.
I only asked the question because, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but I am asking the question is, if it should come down the road or in a future application, if the board feels that 2 weeks is a better time frame, I want to be sure that I'm directing the people that I'm paying, frankly, to provide the information within such a time frame that it doesn't inhibit both the public and the board from reviewing that material.
I know in my case, that would have eliminated my concern. I would have had time to go through it as a board member. I don't know that if there's abutters who are doing detailed reviews and hiring third parties to do the detailed reviews, I don't know if there's a time that you could anticipate would be enough. I think it's a hard problem.
I would agree with that.
So I don't think you can make the concern go away. I think we're really talking about a practical matter.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Less than a week was tough.
Okay.
Which
Do
is
have a
what I
motion
personally
here
had.
somewhere?
I'll
Hey,
make a motion to continue the public hearing.
I think we already did that, didn't we?
Yeah.
We already did that and voted.
Okay.
We did?
We voted.
Oh,
Well, can
do we
we,
need
can
any
we,
more?
can I start with the next topic then?
Yeah.
We already did.
We did vote.
We
We agreed
continue.
unanimously to do that.
Right.
Oh, okay, well.
Okay, now I just,
15 minutes ago.
I can't remember 15 minutes.
okay. At last, we're up to item 2. Item 2, which is 180401 Catherine Erascus Walsh Engineering. It's a public hearing on approval to construct a 200 plus or minus foot riprap revetment. So, and Mr. Walsh is still here, so very nice.
And he's awake.
And he's awake. That's great. Uh-oh, the lights are going off here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Congratulations to you both on your new positions. Bill Walsh with Walsh Engineering. As you said, I'm here representing Catherine Erascus on a shoreline stabilization project, which she has at her home at, get the right address here, at 30 Skipper Joe's Point Road. The proposed plan is basically a revetment. I'm going to orient you real quickly. This is Skipper Joe's Road over here. The ocean is over here, and this is Catherine's house. I'm going to just pass, I showed this last time, but if you go, just pass those photos. This is a picture of Catherine's house that I'm passing along, and that was in the March storms, and you can see her driveway is underwater there. That's part of the reason which we're bringing this forward. What we are proposing to do here is to put in, this is the stone revetment right along here with the rock shown. And we're also proposing to fill an area right here, anywhere between 3 feet down here on this side up to about 0 here. The land presently kind of slopes in this direction. The essentially, that picture that you're looking at is out here at Skipper Joe's, looking back at Catherine's home and the water that got into her house in March, in through her garage. The existing project is in the shoreland zone. This is the 75-foot setback right here. And so everything that we're proposing really is getting permitted in this area. The majority of the lot is developed. I don't have that. I don't have that percentage. I think it's 25% or so that was developed on the site. The seawall itself will be 200 feet long from edge of property to edge of property, all the way down here. The stone walls will be set into a The stone revetment itself this is a section through the proposed stairs. These are the larger boulders here, right here, and the stairs rise up and then drop back down to keep that elevation up higher, to keep the ocean from coming over the top. There are a series of rows of rugosas that exist on the back side of the wall now. They got pretty well whacked in the storms. Actually, the cobbles came up through them, but they do still exist there. The idea is to sort of take those and transplant them and put them back to the extent that we can, so try to save as many of those rows of rugosas on the backside. And the top of the wall elevation right here will be at about elevation 16. The ground down here is at about 14 on the backside. So again, it's really just trying to break the velocity of the water of the waves that are rolling in off of the ocean. And actually, if you look closely at those pictures, you can actually see the ocean that was during the storm event. You can see the wave heights peaking behind it. We are proposing it's just outside of the 75-foot setback, but the driveway presently comes in here. We have a removal of some pavement in this area, and we're going to put that pavement back on the side over here. We also, Nina, you had that question about the walkway and not meeting the permit. We have actually taken the walkway out, so this will just be grass through here. We've taken that impervious area and added it back in through this space, so that we do in fact comply with the NRPA permit, because you had a good point about that.
But you're leaving the stairs, and that wasn't covered in the permit?
The stairs were.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, the stairs definitely were. Just there was a walkway that went from there. It actually went from there to there in the previous plan that we had. But the steps are definitely, they're really just stones within they're just flat stones instead of round stones. So they were included in that permit. So I think those are the issues that we have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Couple of questions, please. The original, the write-up says that something about discontinuing the garage and removing the doors, and I don't see any mention of that on the removals plan. What's going on there?
We've talked about it, and at this point, we're simply permitting the work that's in the 75-foot zone, and that's really what the board has jurisdiction over. There is a possibility, and Catherine may do this, but it's possible to actually remove these garage doors that exist on this side, i.e. bring the grade up on the backside. We can do that, and Werner can talk to that when he comes back in, but we can do that through a building permit. It doesn't require board approval. We have to get approval for everything within the 75-foot setback.
So I only brought it up because I read it in the application.
Yeah, yeah.
You're saying that work is not going to be included?
Exactly. It's not part of this permit.
Okay. Are there two reasons this lot is non-conforming? One is the lot size is below the minimum?
It probably is.
0.93?
Yeah, most
okay.
of them are.
And the other is it's got 25% impervious
Correct.
surfaces rather than 20.
Correct.
So with the removal of the walkway, you had an opportunity to if not be compliant, but certainly to reduce the nonconformance.
Right.
But instead, you're taking that and you're adding to the driveway?
Right.
What's the rationale there?
Part of the rationale is to be able to retain the impervious area and keep it grandfathered. That's part of the reason
I
why.
see. Okay.
It,
And as part of that, doing that,
yep,
it looks like there were other changes made to the site plan. Like the construction road, which didn't go over the setback line before, now goes and enters into the setback area.
the setback is right here,
Yeah.
this road right here.
Yeah, and it's continuance, you know.
Yeah, this over here, yeah, I think we just probably have shown that a little bit better. It did go there. We obviously have to get trucks up there to get to the,
I think it was shown
To the
before to not go over that new impervious area, and I wondered, why not just keep it where it was before?
right here.
Yeah, you've shifted it all south, or if that's the direction there, to the lowest part.
Down here?
Yeah, it's shifted in that direction. It used to go where that new impervious
Right
area
through
was.
here?
Yeah.
I think we just.
And maybe
some of it-
I don't mean to be picky, I'm just asking, are there any other changes that have come about on this drawing?
No, I think that was it. It was really just changing that impervious area over to there. That may have gotten shifted. I'm not sure that got shifted, or the widening of that driveway is what makes it looks like it was shifted. These lines may show up better. This is temporary. This is just a temporary drive that will be put in during construction. So it goes in simply to get vehicles, to get access up here, the dump trucks.
I know that if we were looking at moving that structure or expanding the structure, we'd be looking at language that says you need to minimize the nonconformance to the degree possible.
Mhm.
And so it bothered me to see that yet an obvious way to reduce the nonconformance in taking out that walkway. And it sounds like we're deliberately adding impervious surface to keep the lot nonconforming.
We're not adding, we're keeping it the same.
Well, you're adding it to the driveway, having removed it from another section of the property. You've introduced
We've
new
relocated
scope
it.
of work
Right, we've
in order
relocated
to retain the nonconformance to the degree it exists, and that seemed bothersome.
But that's allowed in the land use ordinance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Still
pretty.
bothered me even though.
Yes.
I understand your point. It actually is done pretty regularly in
Thank
these,
you.
in these zones.
Yeah.
Yep,
I'm the new guy.
yep, no, I get it.
It's fine. Thank you.
That other walkway stays.
This one goes away.
No, they both go.
Oh, that goes away too?
Yep,
Okay, that's what I wasn't
Yep.
sure about in your new drawing there. It
yep,
says-
this goes away, and these walls go away right here that are retaining walls.
But you're moving them out, aren't you?
Yeah, they go out of the 70, they're getting pulled back, so they are being made more non-conforming. That stuff's being pulled back and put right next to the driveway.
No, wait a minute, explain that again, because
Sure.
you've got a line of stones here. Okay, they're being pulled out, or they're staying?
No, there are actual vertical walls here, masonry walls that exist.
Okay.
And those are their retaining walls.
See that?
Those are going to be removed. This is a stone wall that will sort of replace that, and it is behind the 75-foot
It's
side.
behind 75
Yep,
foot.
Yep, so that brings it back.
Okay. Okay.
I did notice one totally minor nuisance thing on this new chart. When you total up your proposed and impervious, well, he used a spreadsheet and then printed the numbers that came out of it, and they don't total up.
Okay.
They're missing by 1/10 when you get to the bottom. It's
Okay.
an old view graph trick that that managers always used to use.
Yep.
Is they just add the last column and it doesn't
Okay.
add up.
Okay,
So it's only off by 1. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
we can look at that and see if we can correct it.
so. So, Nina, are we good at this point?
I think we're good.
Do you want to do the finding of facts next time, or you want to?
I want to do because of the changes that
Yeah,
I wasn't
because of
clear
the
about,
changes.
I'd rather revise
That's
these
perfect.
findings of fact.
Okay, but we want to then
We could go ahead and
go and
approve.
approve the project and
Right.
Have findings next time.
So I'll make a motion to approve the project.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, so we'll have the findings for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. What's that piece of paper again? No. Okay, now moving to 180402, Robert and Dana Holland. They come in last. Riverside and Pickering Marine Contractors Authorized Agent. And I want to say, I love the new proposal. It's much nicer.
Checklist?
I like the checklist, I like the organization of it, it had a table of contents, I just really liked it. So,
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Zachary Taylor with Riverside Pickering Marine, here representing the Hollands for the public hearing for the site plan review of the proposed docking structure. We just revamped the package for you guys. Mostly, we added the checklist and I went through and labeled the various sections so it was easier to read and access the information. We made some revisions as requested from our application review and our previous get-together here, and confirmed that the lot acreage is 0.89 acres, and made revisions just to make sure that's consistent throughout the package. As requested as well regarding 511B15 and confirming the not exceeding a certain distance across the waterway. Added that measurement to the plan sets, the overview plan, sheet 1 of 3, as well as added a Google Earth image for you guys. And then we also went through and clarified and demonstrated the location of the KK&W easement on the plans, as well as located the water easement, both the responsibility of the KK&W as well as the private line from Paddy Creek Road Water Association. Worked extensively with Mr. Beard, whose intel on that entire situation was invaluable, as well as the members of the KK&W who spent a lot of time with us as well, coordinating to make sure that the project would be out of harm's way, so that the existing utilities would be okay in those locations. And then, as I mentioned, created that checklist from section 5-11 or .11. And lastly, we had the site walk for with the selectmen on the 22nd. Some of the members of the planning board joined us, and then we moved on to the public hearing on the 24th and received approval from the selectmen. So that's the recap on what happened last time and the revisions, additional information requested, and what you guys see in front of you with your current package. So regarding the project itself, it's just a docking structure to provide access from their waterfront parcel on Wilds District Road, a 4 by 35 foot fixed pier, which is a permanent structure with a 4 by 30 foot gangway leading to a 10 by 20 foot seasonal float. And we have our DEP and Army Corps approvals, which are included in the package. And I'm sure the board will have additional questions. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
Okay. I have one question. I'm hoping that you have a typo in here, but you've changed the lot coverage, the existing lot coverage figure that was in here. It used to say plus or minus 13.28. And now it says 13 plus or minus 13.276. So usually that plus or minus means this is approximate. And you've added a third decimal point of accuracy.
Yeah, it's,
And you've,
so we can.
in so doing, you've made the existing lot coverage less than the proposed lot coverage, which isn't something we can okay. So I'm questioning whether or not that's a typo.
Maybe they added it wrong too.
I don't know, but
Well, I see it as, it says existing 13.276 and proposed it says 13.28.
Right, so we have an additional 1.5 square feet.
it used to say 13.28, the last
Right,
revision of
they
this.
added the 1.5 square feet.
Yeah.
You're
For the
saying you're
dock.
deliberately
So there's an
increasing the lot
There's an
coverage.
increase, right,
Yeah, 1.5 square feet.
1.5.
Okay. I thought you hadn't measured it before to within 1.5 square foot, so they were basically, you were saying it was the
No,
same, but.
we did have the 1.5 square feet. I think what we had was the information wasn't carried through. We had a typo in the other section of the application, so it wasn't consistent throughout.
Okay, good. So, Neil, do you have
Yeah,
questions here?
So I was tasked with writing the finding of facts, and I had some questions when I started doing so. So hopefully they can get cleared up and I can complete that. But the first question I had was on compliance with the B.15.
Yep.
The distance from the dock to
Yes.
Across the water. How did you come to that? You know, what was the process of, because it comes to 19.82%, which is almost a fifth of the way across.
Yep, exactly.
So we're within that margin of error, where, how did you calculate that? You know, did you GPS it?
No, so that was specifically surveyed. It's
Okay.
a Trimble 3 Series gun, so we surveyed that both highest observable tide lines. So it wasn't something that was just pulled off of
Okay.
aerial information.
All right. Does that satisfy everyone? Yeah, all right, moving on. One other question I had, I know we asked it at last meeting, was the storage of the seasonal ramp and the dock.
Yes.
Is it gonna be stored on the property? Is it gonna be stored elsewhere? Obviously, if it's on the property, stored on the upland. Is there a plan with that?
So that's the ideal situation is it's just stored safely in the upland. So logistically, it's not always, sometimes it's kind of a trial by error first season in, can we effectively get it up there? And then if it's not we, but there's a local contractor that handles most of the float removals, et cetera. So if not, then it's a removal to an area that it can be stored in the upland.
Okay.
So if you want a direct answer.
No, I don't need a specific spot.
No,
It was just, it was an either-or question, I just wanted to make it clear.
Yep.
In this, okay.
That's our intent. It's easiest if it's just stored in the upland above the highest observable tide line, everything's there, anchored down. But if not, then it's removed and then brought to an upland storage area.
Okay. On the B.5, there is a setback requirement on the dock and then the seasonal ramp and then the dock from the northern boundary and the southern boundary.
Yes.
I didn't see those calculations on I think it was 25 feet is the setback. And obviously the southern boundary is much farther away than the northern boundary. But I didn't see the calculations on there as to what the distance was. I think that just needs to be clarified, I guess. We can get a number. We can just say, all right, it's outside the 25-foot setback, so we're fine.
So I apologize that there's not a specific,
I should have brought it up last time, so I apologize too for going through the.
I mean, it looks like it's about a foot outside of the 25-foot setback, and I don't have that specific measurement.
If it's possible to get that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay,
That's easy.
The
I guess we can open up a public hearing. Anybody?
I've got,
public
sorry,
want-
I've got one.
Oh, you got one more, I'm sorry.
Get that information. Yeah.
That's all. Can you get it to Warner?
Can you make sure you get that to the code office, get that to Warner?
Yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
just, they'll
Yeah,
distribute
we'll
it.
just forward it.
Sorry, give me 1 second. So, in reading the amended submission, in the B.6, it says the deck board shall be a maximum of 6 inches in width, which you guys have 5.5, which is fine, maximum, and spaced 1/2 inch apart. You guys have it at 3/4 inch apart. I understand the reasoning, to allow more sunlight through. I'm wondering, the ordinance is pretty specific. It's got to be a 1/2 inch. Is that something, maybe this is for the board?
Do you think the interpretation of the ordinance is exactly 1/2 inch? Or is it a minimum?
It says shall. Shall be a maximum of 6 inches in width and spaced 1/2 inch apart. I know I'm getting technical here, but.
No, I understand, but
Would we have to give a waiver?
I don't know.
No, but
I would hope
It's in the
not.
ordinance.
Which you technically can't.
Yeah.
obviously there's some tolerance. Is the idea behind that?
Oh, the
Warner,
idea
do you know
behind
is
it
a
is-
minimum or a maximum?
Well, I think the idea behind that is that that's a minimum. It doesn't specifically say that, but I think the intent is that that's a
Right.
minimum.
It just kind of
minimum
tasks through and
distance.
doesn't,
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm fine
I
with the
think
3/4.
so too. Yeah, I think it's a minimum.
If the board
Let's
is,
interpret it to a minimum. You
any
can,
thoughts?
I would put it in your finding of facts that you have interpreted it as a.
Yeah.
The board
Okay.
interprets
All
it as a minimum.
Yep.
It's strange that it doesn't give a maximum.
Just that English language.
That was
all I was
everything.
getting.
It's the drafter.
Thank you.
It's not the English language.
It was probably pulled from some performance standard, that gave a specification for, dock construction, residential dock construction.
Well, you wouldn't want it a foot space.
No, right.
But
Yeah, you get
how
too big of
close
a
to
gap
1/2
and,
inch?
now you start having safety issues.
You always got a measurement tolerance.
Yeah.
They're always gonna swell and they're gonna shrink. I mean, it's not realistic to specify exactly 1/2 inch for such a thing.
That's true.
I think
Well, you
that's
can
why
use
I
that
was-
as a rationale
Yeah.
for interpreting it that way, that, there had to be a minimum because of swelling.
All right.
There you
Would
go.
be swell.
I don't know if I'll go that deep.
Yeah,
but-
there you go.
I mean, if it helps at all, it's DEP and across the border DES, they typically don't want to see anything less than 3/4 of an inch. So that's generally why I didn't really mess around with it. It's just kind of how we typically do it. That's what they like to see, just to increase the ambient light underneath the dock.
Okay,
So
that helps.
if that helped at all.
Well, I think there's a trend toward doing that.
Right, exactly.
So is the board, other board members, are you all of the opinion, do you share the opinion that the additional 1.5 square foot of impervious lot coverage is insignificant? Or you're saying it's not non-conforming, so it doesn't matter?
Well, you're under your 20%.
Yeah.
No, so I'm being silly, never mind. I'm just obsessive. Hey, it happens.
We need obsessive people on board.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
okay.
Okay, so, there's some?
I'll make a motion to,
Oh, no, we have to.
oh, sorry.
We have to open the public
I'll
hearing.
make a motion to open the public hearing.
All right. Now, I know we're gonna have lots of comments on this, but, okay, I'm going to close the public hearing also. Now. Yeah, you're fine with it, that's good. So, public was actually here, that's good.
That is good.
Anyway, why don't you,
Yeah, I'll
make your motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? And you do the FOF for next time?
Yep.
Okay.
Just one comment, I like your north arrow on there. It's very artistic.
Yeah, great job.
Try to spruce things up.
There you go, yes, okay. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. of the
Last
board.
week.
Thank you.
Great job.
It's not happening tonight, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So what is that, another 2
Just-
weeks?
That means 2 weeks from now, we will sign it. You don't have to be
We have
here.
to be here.
But you have to make sure that it gets from Werner to the York.
And it's at that point
to-
that we can apply, go forward.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'd be welcome to come.
Yes, we like having people.
See how Pinnacle turns out.
Right, yeah, that's true, you could watch. All right, the last item is item 180403, Southern York Properties LLC. Ralph Austin. And there she is, Ralph Austin.
Doing my Ralph Austin impersonation
Whoa.
tonight.
Okay, proceed.
Sandra Gay, Attorney Women Edmonds, here tonight for the applicant, property owners, Southern York Properties LLC. And the contractor, of course, is here this evening, Gary Martin. I know that I went through this application before, don't know how much you want me to go through again. Basically, there's an existing house. There was a structural engineer that came in and did a report of the foundation and the structure, both failing. The plan is to rebuild the house in the same place. I know that there were a couple of questions at the meeting the last time. I did watch the video, and there was a letter sent, hopefully you got copies of, to Werner on May 24th from Ralph Austin, who addressed those questions that you had. One was whether there was a soil erosion control plan, and Ralph last time had pointed out that there is a proposed silt fence that's going around, but it's up here, sorry. But also, there'll be stump grindings in front of that fence as well. The contractor will install the silt barrier before he begins work, and the work will be conducted by a contractor who's certified in erosion control as required by the DEP. Another question had to do with whether there would be additional hardscape. There will not be any additional hardscape. And the third had to do with the elevation of the foundation. The new foundation will not be elevated. There is a correction on this plan, though this is a new plan, and Leon just corrected it. So it originally had said that the elevation, would be 11.76 feet. It's actually 14.65 feet, which is the existing elevation right now. So it's not changing. So there will be no increase over what the existing is right now. Lastly, I think you might have just received this tonight, but they did receive a permit by rule from the DEP for it, for the work.
Good. So, I guess, Ed, you have questions?
Yes, and similar to what you just heard from Neil, I've started to go through and outline the findings of fact, and most of the information was there, but I did have a few additional questions, one of which I think you just answered. The silt fence, does it go around the perimeter of the property?
Well, yes, there's that seal. It's actually on the plan, and you can see it goes up like this,
Yeah.
and then down like that. So everything but the road.
Yeah, okay, I thought that was true. There's a little confusion in my mind on there. There's a arrow pointing to what looks like the same markers, and it says that it's a fence. Is that just a 4 or 5 foot section of fencing that it's talking about if you're looking at it from the road on the left side of the property? About halfway up the structure, yeah, in that area?
Oh, there's an old post rail fence. Yeah, there's just an old fence.
I wasn't sure whether or not, but the silt fence goes all the way around, and you're saying
Yes.
there's going to be stump grindings in front of the fence all the way along, so.
Yeah.
Right, and typically, I can tell you that, the preferred method realistically nowadays is not to use silt fence at all, and just to go with the stump grindings. I mean, that's, in the grand scheme of it, has been the preferred method.
Okay.
Because quite frankly, it's been a long time since I've actually seen a proper installation of a silt fence, the way that it's supposed to be done. And, the stump grindings tend to you know, they're an easy install, and they can just be dispersed on the property. They don't have to be removed. So there's a much better chance of a proper.
As you know, in the process of trying to write an affirmative findings of facts, you're required to answer some questions. Shoreland zoned properties in particular emphasize the need to control erosion. I wanted to be able to say specifically what was being done, and you've addressed that. Now, Werner's bringing up the point is maybe he doesn't like it.
I'm just,
but-
I'm just being, being practical in terms of what
Well,
we see happen.
Let me just
you know,
ask the
and-
contractor, is the silt, do you have a preference?
Because of the proximity to the water, to even hold regular debris, and so it doesn't.
We're good.
Someone doesn't set something over on the wall and
No.
off it goes into the river.
Appreciate it. Okay. See if I can get my questions together. The other, there's a couple of numbers questions I'll ask, but the other broad question I have has to do with landscape. And I know that the ordinance requires that in the course of reconstructing a property like this on a non-conforming lot, if in the course of doing that you destroy any existing vegetation and all, you're required to put it back, basically in kind with something like that. And I know there isn't a lot of landscaping there, but there is a rugosa hedge up in the front, and that the plans seem to be silent on landscaping. Could you say something about that?
I don't, so generally, and I guess maybe you could point me to, I do have the ordinance here with me.
I'm thinking of
generally.
I'm thinking of 8.3B5 in the first paragraph.
I'm sorry, 8B35, did you say? No, not 8.
8.3B5.
Yeah, so you're referring to the last,
Page
first
8-5.
paragraph.
The last sentence in the
Last
first
sentence in the
paragraph.
paragraph.
So, and it refers you back to the section before,
Right,
which talks about
if you take down
trees.
trees, here's how you know,
Right.
here's what you can swap in kind, and if you take out vegetation, here's what you should replace it with. It's not
Yeah, it's just so
overly
if
burdensome.
other,
It's basically, don't leave the vegetation in a state that isn't as nice, at least, as what you started with.
or as able
Could
to,
end up a lot nicer than.
yeah. So, I mean, certainly.
Absolutely, it wouldn't, take a lot, but on the other hand, nothing's been said, so I wanted to poke at it a bit.
So I would suggest maybe just making that a condition of approval. That just to make sure that any vegetation that's removed or destroyed is
Okay,
replaced in
no,
kind.
that's fine, we can do it that way. I just really wanted to hear you say, oh yeah, there's landscaping included, we just didn't put it in the plans.
Well, if you picture the house in front of it when you come in, that's the same owner. It's beautifully landscaped.
It is very nicely done.
I'm
and-
sure they'll carry that by no lake.
Yeah, okay, not to worry, and at least I can say we had this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Again, it's not a landscaping plan, but certainly as a condition of approval, it seems appropriate.
Couple of detailed questions, please. I wanted to have in my mind the degree, the ways in which the lot and the structure are non-conforming right now. It seems to me we've got an undersized lot. We basically built it within the 75-foot setback.
Well,
Right.
there wasn't a 75-foot setback when it was built.
But we will be
Yeah.
building it back where it is. And is the side setbacks, are they,
It's non-conforming
Maintain-
to every setback,
so it's basically zero lot line?
which is, well, it's, no matter which way you go,
Now,
it's
where is it?
non-conforming.
Where is it? Yes, but I was looking for a number. Where is it with respect to the road in terms of,
Let's see, let's jump so it's probably about 15 feet from the road at its furthest point, and then it goes down. So
Right, and we were we'd look for 20 if it was a conforming lot. So you think you're at about 15, and you think on the sides we're about at 0, is what I'm hearing.
Well, this is, you can see the side right here, you know, it's,
I couldn't see a number, but I was,
10 on the east side, probably. And
yeah.
I have scale
well, this is the driveway goes up to access the property, which goes pretty much right up to the property line on the side.
All right. 0 to 5 foot.
Yeah.
And then lot coverage, of course, which you're actually maintaining or doing a hair a bit better. And it's a 50-foot lot width. That's my enumerated list, if that's okay.
Correct.
The assessor's chart says that the living space is 1151 square feet, and yet the application says it's 1326, and the new structure is intended to be 1326.
So
you tell me what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I probably can, and maybe Werner can help with that, but I saw as part of the application, they have a architect who goes in there and measures and comes up with everything. Tax card records are notoriously not necessarily correct, so you would rely on what the architect or the expert who is willing to, you know, put their name stamp on it, that would be the correct measurement, not whatever the tax.
But the assessor's card lists how it got to that figure. It says there's this much on the first floor and there's this much here, and that's a big difference.
Yeah, so if you look at the tax card, whenever you use a living area,
okay,
you know, a living area number, so you'll notice that the half-story finished attic is classified, has a gross area 621, but you know, in the living area it has a 466.
Right.
Right.
So that's about the right amount we're off on.
Right. Well, and so I mean, you know, this happens pretty regularly. Whether or not an architect is measuring a gross area on a tax card, really what they're measuring out there is what they call an effective area, and so it's you know, it's a built-in calculation into the software system that anytime you classify an area as as an FHS or finished half-story, there's an automatic reduction.
Understood.
That's built
for
into
tax
that.
purposes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's built into that calculation.
But
So-
the living space is arguably there.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So you're good. You're good with the 1326.
I'm fine
number.
with that.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah. And the other piece here is that I mean, the system that we use here, it's going to round you to the nearest foot. And so arguably there's always some, there's always some margin of error because of that piece of it. Yeah. Yeah. So I tend to place a little bit more stake on an actual field verification, of it on an as-built.
I hadn't appreciated that there was a field verification until this minute,
Yep.
though. So that's perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's good. Similarly, the assessor's card is listing this as 0.08 acres. We're saying it's 0.061. Is that because it's to the high water mark and the assessor's is?
Again, there's, I think, a difference between a
just the
surveyor
measure?
going out there and doing a survey and them measuring it.
So
as
this
they
is
do.
as surveyed?
This is as surveyed, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think, let me just check my notes here. Is there any exterior lighting planned? Just a house light, a front door light or something? Okay, none planned? Yep. Flood hazards. I see you're doing something special with the window at the ground level.
Yeah, the basement level has flood vents.
Can you just tell me what those are?
Water can come in, water can go out, basically.
So to prevent the water from taking the structure? Is that?
Yeah, it reduces your the hydrostatic load on the structure. Anytime you do, in this particular case, you know, and it's been a common practice, as we've been dealing with preliminary flood maps. You know, most folks, as they're doing renovations on houses that are in the flood zones, you know, most property owners are looking at the proposed elevations, and they're doing their renovations with proposed elevations in mind. For this type of structure, where it's basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a walkout basement, and so, putting flood vents in the exposed end of it is an appropriate flood measure.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything to be said? There's one last question. This is honest. Is there anything to be said for stormwater handling on this property before and after? Like, it's a flat property. Is there runoff that goes through it, or is there anything special consideration at all for stormwater handling?
No, it's not flat, it pitches all back
To the river?
to the river.
Okay. And there's no change now, no change in the elevation? Okay, thank you.
All right, now I'm going to open the public hearing.
And close.
And I'm going to close the public hearing. So, are we ready to,
I move to consider the application complete.
I already did that last.
I'm sorry, to approve the application.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay.
And I'll have findings of fact at the
Findings of
next
fact
meeting.
next time, and so I'll take one more motion.
I'll make a
Motion to-
motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?